Let's dive straight in. What is tip number one today?
Tip number one is something that I only realized a couple months ago, I think, and it's to begin explanations as a series of questions that most people can answer, maybe everybody in the class can answer. This is an that was a complicated sentence. Should I say that again?
No, I'm loving it, Michael. I like the dramatic pause you left there. It's perfect because it's ideal. Because it's, as we often chat about explanations, we have similar things but different things, and this is definitely different. So tell me how this plays out and tell me why you do this.
So here's what I realized. What I realized is it was during a lesson. I teach young kids and older kids, just as a funny thing about my school. So I teach third graders here. Is one of the classes I teach, and those kids are, what are they, 8, maybe 9, or is it 7 or 8? No, wait, my son is 7, so let's say 8 or 9. So they're on the young end. And I was getting ready to teach a lesson about symmetry, and the first thing that came out of my mouth was, today we're studying symmetry, class. And symmetry is, and I immediately, I backed off in my head. I saw their poor ashen faces, how sad they were that I was diving in like that. And I took a step back then, and I said, okay, wait a second. Tell me a shape that you could fold in half. And that went much better, because then all the hands went up. And I suddenly had a class that was thinking. And thinking in the right direction also, and thinking about things that would be necessary to think about before you could understand what symmetry is. So then I started doing that more often, and I was doing a lesson about algebra with some older kids, and it was about systems of equations. And I said, I know what to do now. And I said, tell me 2 numbers that add up to 10. And they did. They told me, and everybody in the class could do that, even students who would have found it hard for me to start with variables in an equation would have found that hard. If I had written x plus y equals 10, what are 2 numbers that satisfy this equation? There are some students in my class who wouldn't have been able to answer that. So that's when I started thinking, what I should really do is, before I explain anything, I should try to translate basically as much of the explanation as I can into questions. And ideally, it's questions that at the very beginning, everybody can answer, so that I have given everybody kind of a clear signal that they can be part of this. And there's probably cognitive benefits to that also, right? Besides the kind of engagement stuff, I imagine. Because you're saying to kids, you're reminding kids of things. So that's my tip.
Right, well, let's dig into this, Michael, because I love this. But as I say, it's different to what I do. But I think
I don't remember what you do. I've read your books, and yet I can't remember. I'm sorry. Please tell me.
Well, I'm very much kind of, this is the way you do this. Listen to me really carefully. Now you do it, as in a nutshell. But what I want to dig into here with yours is, are these questions your kind of prerequisite knowledge check, or is this a different thing? Are you, it's like systems of equations is a good example. Are you assessing beforehand they know what a variable is? They know how to, add 2 equations together. Has that come before? And then these questions are kind of to engage and get them into it? Or are they much the same?
I don't know. That's a great question. I feel they're very similar territory, right? I think that's what you're picking up on. It feels like a lot of different types of lessons benefit from a slow ramp up, right? Where you have something like this, even if it's not exactly this. I don't think of them as the same way, but maybe I should, right? Maybe I should think of this as the preamble, a kind of a check for understanding of prerequisite knowledge before I dive into a worked example or an explanation or modeling something. But that's not how I think about it. The way I think about it is, when I'm about to explain something, I need to slow down. When I'm about to open my mouth and explain something to kids, I need to translate that. And maybe what that's doing is like you're saying, reminding myself, maybe the reason why that works is because it's checking prerequisite knowledge or kind of reminding kids of prerequisite knowledge. But I think it might be more. I think it might be also because it's an invitation to join in. It's a clear signal you are going to understand this. It's a way to, I love it how in English we say pay attention, as there's as if there's currency involved. It's almost like you're putting down some money on attention, and now you're invested, if you want to take the metaphor further. So that's kind of how I think it. But the thing is that a lot of things in teaching, it feels like when they don't work, it's because of a couple reasons, and when they do work, there's a couple ways to see it. You can see a lot of things socially or cognitively. So should we see this as reminding students of prerequisite knowledge, or should we see it as inviting students to participate? I don't know. They kind of sometimes feel like very hard to separate. They always happen together in teaching, or most of the time they do. I guess you could tear them apart at the edges.
It's really interesting, this, Michael. It feels to me like if I was to build this into the way I do things, then it feels to me like it is a little bit different to prerequisite knowledge in a really good way. Like, I think your symmetry one's a good example of this. Like asking kids, can you think of a shape that you can fold in half? That feels to me a very different than a prerequisite knowledge check. That feels to me, as you say, I like this idea of this invitation that you're part of what's about to happen, this new knowledge. So it feels like this could kind of sandwich in between. And my concern with making this a prerequisite knowledge check is the thing with prerequisite knowledge checks that I think anyway is you need to get mass participation. You've got to get all the kids responding, because if you don't, then there's a real danger. You start making assumptions that just because one child knows this, everybody knows this, and that's bad news anyway. But particularly for prerequisite knowledge, because then the whole deck of cards could fall apart. So I'm interested in how you're kind of collecting responses in this, what I would consider kind of this middle phase where you're asking questions as part of your explanation. Is it one-to-one? Is it whiteboards? What how does that play out?
It's not systematic. I mean, it could be systematic, but I'm thinking about this third grade class where they were often transitioning between things. The way this works is for these little kids, I come into this classroom and they're in the middle doing something with their homeroom teachers, and then I come in and I say, hey, it's math time. Mathematics time, math time. It's time to do some arithmetic or whatever. And so I'm really sensitive to gathering attention and having it feel as fun and communal as what was happening before. So often the other thing about this that I want to say, just in response to your question, is my addled brain sort of like remembers things that I wanted to say in the wrong order. So I'm sorry about that. But the other thing I wanted to say was part of asking a question that everyone can answer is that it's an easier question. So how do you deal with that? It's not engaging for a very sharp child to be asked a question that's much too easy for them. So the way this would often work is I would say, maybe that symmetry question. Tell me a shape that you could fold. Actually, I'm going to go with the other one. Tell me two numbers that can add up to 10. And I would look around the room and I'd try to see as many hands up, and I'd be like, Daisy. And I'm calling on Daisy because Daisy never raises her hand, and she, often has a hard time in math class. So Daisy, go first. 8 and 2. Brilliant. Who's got another one? I'm picking another kid. Okay. And maybe that's Mark. And Mark is, 5 and 5. Amazing, Mark. I'm writing it on the board. And then I see, Oliver. Oliver has his hand up. And Oliver is an all-star. So I call on Oliver. And Oliver says, 5 and a quarter and 4 and 3/4. And I say, great. And I write that down. And I want to honor the fact that he's thinking. So I would sometimes ask like a follow-up question in that case. I would say, oh, that's amazing. And how did you know that? How did you figure that out? How did you decide that it was going to be that? I mean, I noticed that that's smaller than 5. You went, 4 and 3/4. Can you say a little bit about that? Trying to show to those kids in the class that because there's this contract that you need to have, right? Of the promise I'm sort of making here with this activity is I'm promising kids who often have a hard time in math class that they're going to be able to understand what happens. And I'm promising also to kids who feel sometimes as if the class is moving too slow for them, or if they've got it already, that I'm promising you're going to learn something too, that you're going to have to think hard also. So I'm trying to promise everybody that good stuff is coming.
This is great, Michael. But just one final question on this. You know, I'm always intrigued by the way you do worked examples where your students study the completed worked example, read it, then answer the self-explanation prompts and so on. How would that fit in with this? Would it be a kind of series of these kind of almost kind of warm-up or participation questions, and then it'd be, okay, now here's a new thing for you to study? What's the transition between the questioning to the studying the example look like?
I think it's exactly like you said. And it ties to what we were saying earlier, which is that things like this, things like these invitations or these opener questions, more open questions, are a frequent part of instructional models. When you look around, it's almost like a part of everybody's paradigm. It's a good idea that a lot of people have, is that one way or another, you want to start with something more accessible, either for cognitive reasons or for social. So with worked examples, I'm thinking, hey, there's a lot of, I know where we're heading, and I want us all to notice stuff that is going to be necessary for the worked example. I want us to remember the things that are going to show up in the worked example, perhaps. So it might be more tightly connected to prerequisite knowledge. And then I would say, well, everybody, we've just found a bunch of numbers that add up to 10. Now, what if I also told you that the difference between, I'm thinking of two numbers that add up to 10, and the difference between them is 3. How would you find that? Let's study an example. Let's look at how one student did that, and then we're on to the next thing. But in a way, that's right, because worked examples is what we do, I think, typically for when we want to teach a procedure, right, or a strategy, and explanations I think of as we want to explain what a category is or what a concept is, and that's part of like the parallel worlds thing here. Like in the worked example procedural world, the way I think of it is, if I'm trying to teach kids a skill or a procedure or a strategy, I'm in the worked example world, and I want to start with some sort of prerequisite question that'll help them notice and remember knowledge, and then we're going to go to a worked example. And then I guess what I'm saying with this tip is, it's broader than that, right? The same kind of two-part thing applies more broadly. Whenever you're trying to explain anything, it's good to start with some questions that everybody is able to answer, because of all the reasons we've been saying. So if I wanted to teach kids what a triangle was, I don't know what I would, the concept of a triangle, I don't know, I kind of just committed myself to something that I don't know how to do. I got young kids. But I suppose what I'd do is I'd say, what are all the things you, I don't know, maybe, what are all the things you can make with three lines? What are all the shapes you can make with 3 lines? And I'd say, and the kid would raise their hand and say, a triangle. I'd be like, great, I'll draw it on the board. And then I'd say, what else can you do? And maybe someone would say, I don't know, just like 3 lines at the center. And we'd do that. And we'd say, okay, these things now I want to teach you. Some of these things are triangles and some of them are not. Just being rigorous about, in my head, remembering to open up the question in the beginning is, I suppose, what this tip is.
I love it, Michael. It's definitely one I'm going to need to reflect on this. I don't think I involve my students enough. I like this invitation. This is definitely something I need to reflect on. Love it, Michael. All right.